Hello everyone and welcome to the Henchman's Memoirs. This week we are talking about Daggerheart, just like pretty much everybody on YouTube is talking about right now. This video is not going to be a review of Daggerheart, and it's not going to be me explaining the mechanics and how to play Daggerheart. Instead, we are going to talk about 6 specific pitfalls that might trip you up in your first session of Daggerheart. Things to be on the lookout for before you sit down to play your first session, either as a player or as the GM, especially if you're mostly coming from 5th edition, and especially if you're not used to the kind of narrative-first story games that Daggerheart is largely drawing from. So our number one thing that we're going to be on the lookout for and be aware of when we get to Daggerheart, the way they did movement and ranges is a little bit wonky, and we need to be sort of get our heads around it before we get to the table. So they tried to include 2 or almost 3 different systems for movement and ranges into this game, and they're not the same as each other, the 3 separate systems, so you pretty much just need to decide what you're going to do. The first thing they did is they just used narrative tags to represent distances, okay? Very close, close, far, very far. A lot of more rules-light narrative games like Dungeon World use a system like this. The downfall of using a system like this is, what's the difference between close and very close? I think of that Doctor Who meme where it's like, is 30 feet close or very close? Well, it depends. If you're talking about a charging bear, 30 feet is very close. If you're talking about my wife sitting next to me in the movie theater, it's very far. So just having these tags is not a great way to do it. The best I've ever seen it done is in the Marvel superhero adventure game from, I think, the 80s. We're going to talk about the narrative tags in a second, but the second way that they want you to do distances in this is based on what they did in the ICRPG, where you could use a banana to measure distances at the table. You just set the minis out, and then if they're beyond a banana, they're at far range or something. So they decided to do the same thing. They want you to use a pen, the short side of an index card, the long side of an index card, the short side of a piece of paper, the long side of a piece of paper, to represent the different distances if you're using minis but not a grid. I don't think anybody's going to actually do this. You're going to come up with some kind of measuring stick to actually use at the table, because that's just too many physical objects to try to have everybody have, and you still end up measuring distances. The third way you can do it is they just include down here, if you are using a grid, you can just use these distances to represent these different tags. The problem is they don't match. For example, very close is 5 to 10 feet up here, but it's 3 squares, which is 15 feet down here. And far range is 30 to 100 feet down here, but it's 12 squares, which is 60 feet down here. So it's a little bit weird the way that they lay it out. And the reason it's important is because, especially if you're the GM, all the players have on their cards is very far range or very close, all enemies that are very close to each other. And so they're constantly going to be looking to the game master and say, are all of those guys close to each other or very close to each other? And the solution is probably going to be to just have a little note card at the top of your GM screen that says the actual distances that you're using for each of these. Maybe write it on both sides of the card so the players can see it too, and it's easy to use. If you are going theater of the mind, I think you should, again, draw from this or games like Freebooters on the Frontier. The only distances that matter in a fantasy role-playing game are melee, let's say swords, pole arms, a weapon you can throw, a weapon you can shoot. Okay, those are the only damage distances we're really worried about. I know that a short bow and a long bow, but again, we're trying to go rules light and sort of keep things fast and loose. So you could just say for your game, melee obviously means sword, very close means pole arms, close is throwing an axe, far is, shooting a bow, very far is at the extreme range of a bow or spell, maybe you're giving them disadvantage, and then you have out of range. So just decide in advance which one of those systems you're going to be going with and have it ready to go. So that's solution number one. Problem number two, forced movement. So this is going to be a little bit weird if you're used to 5e, because when you do Thunder Wave and you push somebody back in 5e, they get a saving throw. And so you don't have to worry so much about people trying to push back a huge monster that has a fantastic strength or constitution save. In this game, it doesn't work like that, right? A monster has a single difficulty for everything that you're going to try to do to it, whether it's damaging it or whether it's pushing it back or whatever. So they took this from 4th edition. In the days of 4th edition, the designers decided a cool little add-on to put on a power or ability was you did damage to them, or you put them on fire, or you poison them, but then you also were able to slide them X number of squares, or shift them X number of squares, or pull them X number of squares. And that is one of the reasons why people felt like 4th edition was kind of video gamey, because the battlefields didn't usually have something like a chasm that you were going to push somebody into. They were very video gamey. They were just sort of a flat level. But this is a narrative game, and somebody who has the first level ability, Power Push from the Book of Ava, all they have to do is succeed on a spellcast roll against the target's difficulty, and they can knock them back to very far range, as in past 60 feet. Okay, so don't blame your players if they get to the table and they see this ability and the dragon has your barbarian pinned down with its massive claw and he's struggling with all his might to get loose, and you just cast this and knock the dragon back to very far distance and he's fine. Basically, the solution to problem number two is you need to understand that they didn't go into a lot of detail about the forced movement rules, but I mean, we all know that a first level, first tier ability is not going to throw a gigantic dragon all the way out to very far distance. I suggest, if you're the narrator, give the players a chance to use these cool abilities against appropriate foes, so that maybe when it comes time for them, where they're trying to use it against something that can't be moved that easily, they won't feel as bad when you tell them no. You could also spend a fear to sort of gamify the fact that, well, it doesn't really work against this particular enemy. All right, so the next thing we need to talk about in your first session, be on the lookout for the first time that somebody tries to help an ally. So using the help an ally action, it says here, if you could feasibly support another character's action, you can spend a hope and you can roll a d6, and that counts as an advantage die. They get to add that to their roll. Okay, so when this ability is first used at your table, you are going to be setting the bar for what is feasibly support for the whole rest of the campaign, or maybe as long as you play Daggerheart, okay? If the bar is set as low, if you watch the actual play, the first time somebody uses it, they just are like, you go get them, Gracie, and they spend a hope, and that person gets advantage. And if that's all you want to use this for, is just sort of a mechanical thing where they're spending a hope to give you a die, that's perfectly fine. But if you set the bar that low, that means that those are the only help ally actions that you are going to see for the whole campaign. It's just going to be, hey, garbage breath, over here, and then they spend a hope. If you set the bar a little higher, you can actually enrich the narrative, turn this from just a gamey, sort of numbers thing to something that actually impacts the story. So we're going to be talking about this a lot more in our next video on this channel, which is going to be how to sort of level up your GMing of Daggerheart based on lessons learned from some of these other games. But for now, just understand that your stories are going to be better if people are aiding an ally in a way that actually increases the tension and excitement and interest of the narrative, okay? And to do this, you have to let them move on the battlefield. They have to be able to slide to the edge of the pit and reach out their hand and desperately try to catch the thief's belt. They need to be able to shoot a few arrows at the side of the dragon's head, not to damage it, but just to draw its attention to them and possibly face its dragon breath. They need to be able to move between the wizard and the troll and hold up their shield and be like, not until you get through me. And that gives the wizard just a couple more seconds he needs to aim his spell properly. And you can tell from those examples, this gets really good when players have to put themselves in danger of retribution or cost in order to help that ally. That's when they're actually adding to the narrative. They put themselves in a position where if the wizard fails on that roll, now both of them are going to get hit by the troll. Now both of them are facing the dragon's breath or something like that. So just be aware you are setting the bar as a table the first time somebody uses this ability. There's another little thing in here, a bonus fact for number 3. When you think about advantage and disadvantage, it's sort of similar to what you're used to in 5e, right? Advantage and disadvantage cancel each other out, and you roll this and you add it to your ability roll. But there's something in here, they don't mention it over on the page where they actually talk about advantage and disadvantage, but there's a little rule in here. They say multiple PCs can use help an ally on the same action. And they each roll a d6, and whoever rolls the highest, that is what the person adds to their action roll. And it says in here that if the person has advantage from another source, they too can roll an advantage die, and you just take the highest one. So what this means is advantage does stack in Daggerheart. I played a demo of this at my friendly local gaming store, and immediately everybody at the table, somebody was like, oh, I'm going to aid them. And then somebody else was like, well, I want to aid them too. And everybody at the table was like, oh, he's already got advantage, right? In this game, advantage does stack. You can get advantage from multiple sources and you just take the highest one. And what that means, game masters everywhere, it doesn't explicitly say this, but as far as I can tell, disadvantage stacks too. So as long as you've been playing 5e, you've always wanted to yell out to a player, you have double disadvantage on this roll. And everybody at the table laughs because, of course, you're not going to roll 3 d20s and take the lowest one. That's not the way the rule works. But in Daggerheart, disadvantage from different sources should stack. So that if it's dark and rainy, but also you are recovering from a concussion where you just fell down, and the monster is 3 times your size, you could give somebody double or triple disadvantage on a roll, which I think would be hilarious. And also, it still just means they're probably going to get -5, -6 on the roll. It's not like giving them double or triple disadvantage means that they're automatically going to fail. So we finally get to pull that out and do that, which I think is great. Okay, so number 4, let's talk about the elephant in the room. One of the, I think, where they drop the ball the biggest in Daggerheart is armor points and damage thresholds. So let's talk about what's wrong with this and how we can fix it. First of all, the number one thing is the game just assumes that everybody is wearing armor all the time. The game assumes that you sleep in your armor and bathe in your armor, and if you're trying to sneak into the Baron's feast dressed as caterers, you still have your armor and maybe you have an apron over it. How do I know that the game just assumes that? Well, every place in this book that it talks about your damage thresholds, it just says you take what your armor gives you and you add your level to each one, and those are your damage thresholds. Only in one place in the whole book does it talk about if for some crazy reason you don't have armor on, right? Every one of the pre-gens has armor. Everything else just assumes that your wizard at least has a gambeson on, if not leather armor. This one little paragraph talks about how we're going to run people not having armor on. And what it says is you don't get any armor points, you don't get any bonuses or penalties. Your major threshold is your level, and your severe threshold is twice your level. So what that means, at first level, your major threshold is 2, and your severe threshold is 3. Right? So every hit you take, if you start off the campaign where they're in a jail cell or something in the Underdark and they have to escape, if you start off the campaign where they're in chains in the back of a wagon and they're being taken to some castle to be executed, that first scene where they don't have any armor, or if your party is ambushed at night, they are dog meat at first, second, maybe even third level, because their damage thresholds are going to be so low that they're just going to be taking massive hit points from everything. But the other thing that's so weird about the way they did this is, okay, so gambeson armor gives you 5 and 11 as your base thresholds. You get 3 armor points, and you get +1 to evasion because it's so light. So what that means is if you are 6th level and you're wearing, for whatever reason, still wearing tier 1 gambeson armor, if you take it off, your damage thresholds go up, but your evasion goes down. So this is just a weird design choice. I don't know why they did it, but it's an easy fix. Just go in your copy of Daggerheart, cross out where it says gambeson armor, and just make that the stats for being unarmored. It makes sense that you get +1 to evasion when you're wearing no armor, because obviously that's lighter than leather armor, and these numbers are perfectly good as being your starting values. You could say no armor points because you're not wearing armor, but we're going to get into that next, because the armor point system is a missed opportunity, and it's not right for a narrative game like Daggerheart wants to be. So first of all, the missed opportunity, and as a player, you need to know this. What they wanted to do is they want you to have a choice when you take damage of whether or not you spend an armor point to reduce that damage, or whether you just take it as hit points and save those armor points for later. That seems to be the design intent. The problem is armor points are spent 1 for 1 to reduce hit points. So in reality, your armor point pool is just a backup pool of hit points. You get them back on a short rest or a long rest exactly the same way you get back hit points on a short or long rest. So there's virtually no reason not to spend them all on if you have 3 armor points, there's almost no reason not to spend them on the first 3 hits you get. When you're playing this game at first level, don't agonize over whether you should spend your armor points. Just go ahead and spend them. It would have been different if maybe they had made it so that getting them back is different from getting hit points back. Like you need an armor repair kit, or maybe they don't necessarily work 1 for 1 with your hit points. Or in a game like 5e where healing is super abundant, it would be like, well, I don't want to spend any armor points in this combat because maybe I'm going to need him in the next fight, and our paladin can just heal me up all the way after this fight. So I'm going to save my armor points because those are harder to get back. But in Daggerheart, most of the healing spells come with a cost. They require an action roll, which could increase fear and could give the DM a chance to make a GM move. They cost stress or have other downsides to the player that's healing you. So that further exacerbates the problem where armor points are just spare hit points. You get them back at pretty much the same rate that you get hit points back, and there's absolutely no reason to die with 2 armor points left, right? Just go ahead and spend them. Maybe in Daggerheart 2nd edition, when Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford get in here and mess with stuff, they'll come up with a way to make this an actual meaningful choice, whether or not you're going to spend armor points. But the way the rules are written, it's pretty much a no-brainer that you should spend them all at the beginning of a fight, because there is no point in dying with unspent armor points on your sheet. Which brings us to the next thing, and we ran into this during that actual play demo I was talking about at my friendly local gaming store. There's a problem in the game about what armor points are supposed to represent in the narrative. This wants to be a fiction-forward game like Blades in the Dark, where we're thinking of everything in terms of the narrative, right? So what are armor points supposed to represent in the story? What do we see on screen as somebody is losing armor points? It looks like originally they were thinking that armor points are kind of like durability for your armor, right? So you spend them, your armor gets damaged. There was an optional rule in original D&D and games like old school Essentials where, like, you could sacrifice your shield to take a crit, but then you didn't have a shield anymore, but it ignored the critical hit, or your helmet in some versions of that house rule. So it sounds like they want to do something similar here. You can sacrifice the protectiveness of your armor in order to reduce the hit points you're taking. The problem is you're not sacrificing the protectiveness of your armor. Your damage thresholds don't change. And you can completely repair your armor with absolutely no special knowledge or any tools or supplies or an armor repair kit, nothing. You can just repair them. Anybody in the group can repair your plate mail armor during a short rest. So it ends up not feeling like this is actually the durability of my armor. It almost feels like it's more like toughness points or kind of grit points that I'm able to get back on a short rest, by eating a ham sandwich or something. So as far as the solution for how to deal with this particular problem, the number one thing you can do is just sort of hand wave it and say, yeah, I know it doesn't make much sense. For example, when I was playing through that demo, we fought a bunch of bandits. I didn't really understand the armor rules at that time, so I had used all my armor slots, and I was like, hey GM, can I take the armor off of one of these bandits to wear around that's at full armor points? And he kind of scratched his head a little bit, and so we did a short rest instead. But the thing is, it says in here somewhere, you can get new armor, you can put on new armor, and when you do, you get its damage thresholds and you get its armor points, but you can't carry extra sets of armor in your inventory. Well, in a narrative-based game, why not? Why can't I have a henchman that carries 3 extra gambesons that I can switch into after every fight? Why can't I have a donkey that has 4 sets of leather armor on its back, and after every fight, instead of taking a short rest, which is an hour, I just take a few minutes to switch into a different leather coat? And you might say, well, henchman, you're trying to be a power gamer. You're not working with the spirit of the game, and you just don't understand how narrative-based games are supposed to go. I want to push back on that a little bit. I've been playing narrative-based games longer than Critical Role has been a show. I started playing Dungeon World when it first came out, before Critical Role was even happening, right? And I love these kind of games, but what's happening here is not that I'm not getting behind the narrative idea or the spirit of the game. It's just not very good design, and it's bolting on a sort of purely mechanical system onto a game that wants to be a mostly narrative game. And that's where the sort of seams are showing up. So anyway, the way you can deal it, you can just hand wave it and you can say, yeah, I know you could get different armor. It's just, we're going to play it rules as written and just kind of grin and bear it. The other thing you could do would be to go ahead and replace Tier 1 Gambeson armor as being your unarmored stats. Use those for the unarmored stats. And then maybe think of armor points more as sort of grit or endurance or something like that, where you're sort of catching your breath. That's grit points, but then hit points is actually stitching up wounds and, putting joints back in their sockets or something like that. So it's a little bit tough, but it can be done. Number 5, this is mostly for the game masters. You are going to be looking at these stat blocks that are actually much more sort of minimalist than you are used to in 5th edition. These are the kind of stat blocks that we are used to seeing in something like the Index Card RPG, where the idea here is to make the monsters easier to run by putting less information into the stat block. It's something you can look at. Only what you need to know is on here, and you can run the monster. And I'm totally in favor of that. I think it's fantastic. I love it. Like Dungeon World, they're even smaller than this, and you're just running off of what you see. The thing that might throw you, though, if you're game mastering this and you're used to 5e, especially, is they don't have traits like monsters in 5th edition have ability scores, right? These things don't have traits. They just have a difficulty. So where you're going to run into this, let's think about the young dryad, which is an imperious tree person leading the forest defenses. So I picture this slim, beautiful, graceful creature, and the patchwork zombie Hulk, which is a towering gestalt of corpses moving as one with torso-sized limbs. Okay, so these monsters have cool different abilities that differentiate them, but if your character wants to push one over, or if your character wants to wrestle one to the ground for whatever reason, the difficulties are very close to each other. Meanwhile, if you want to trick or outwit them, the difficulties are also very similar. So the easy way to fix this is just think in terms of, you could use advantage or disadvantage. You could say, well, okay, you're trying to pull this magic item out of the hands of the patchwork zombie Hulk. I'm going to give you disadvantage on that. Whereas you're trying to fast talk the young dryad, I'm going to give you disadvantage on that. The other easier maybe way to do it would just be to adjust the difficulties behind the screen for different kinds of actions that you're going to try to do against different kinds of monsters. And I would take a page out of the Index Card RPG and use increments of 3 to the difficulty to make them enough that you actually notice, right? So the zombie Patchwork Hulk's difficulty is 13, but if you're trying to sort of distract it or outwit it or maybe mind control it or something like that, you're going to take away 3, you're going to take away maybe 6 to represent how much easier it is. By the way, this is a little bonus to the number 5 thing. Just be ready when you sit down to play Daggerheart. It is more math intensive than 5e was. they're trying to pass it off like it's easy to learn and easy to play, and there's practically no math, and that's objectively not true. So rolling 2d12s, well, that's a bad example. Rolling 2d12s and then possibly a d6 and adding these numbers plus a modifier is more arithmetic than just adding what you see on the d20 and the modifier. That's not necessarily bad or good. It just is what it is. In Dungeon World, we used 2d6, which made things a little easier, and there was never a third dice. My solution to this, and I'm being totally serious, go ahead and count on your fingers out loud, because once you do, that gives everybody at the table permission to not try to silently add numbers up in their head on the fly and the modifier that is involved. Okay, just go ahead and be like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's a 15. And then that kind of gives everybody at the table permission to do the same. All right, number 6. We're looking at group roles, tag team roles, and countdown clocks. So don't get these two things confused, because they are almost opposites from each other. And it's going to be, even though they're on the same page, it's just important to understand what's going on here. So a group action role is like in Pathfinder, the follow the leader or whatever they call this move. So this is a situation where you're all trying to climb up the mountain, and instead of everybody just rolling their own climb check, you're putting it on the person who has the best skill or has the best experience or whatever for the task. Like you're all trying to sneak through a castle, or you're all trying to, I don't know, keep a ship afloat or something. And you have one person who's kind of telling everybody else what to do, and then they're just trying to see how well they can follow that person's orders. That's a group action role, and that's why everybody rolls, and they're taking away from or adding to the final role of the leader who is trying to walk everybody through everything. And this is just designed to make it so that you can actually sneak through someplace, even though somebody has, plate mail armor and is drunk and whatever else. In games that don't include something like this, there's always that one person that can't make it up the ramp, and then you're like, well, crap, somebody rolls low. So this is just an attempt to umbrella all that under one role, so it's actually possible to do things. Tag team roles are the next step up from the aid and ally action, right? A tag team role is where, so once per session, you can spend 3 hope to initiate a tag team role with somebody else. They don't spend the hope, you do. You guys team up, and basically one of you rolls, but both of you get to roll damage or something like that, right? This is cool for an enemy that its damage thresholds are so high, or maybe it has resistance to the damage that you're doing, that it's just tough to hurt this thing. And so you want to describe this cool combo move where you pick up you pick Wolverine up and you throw him at the Sentinels, and so you both get to kind of contribute to a single roll. So that's what tag team rolls are. Once per session, you spend 3 hope to kind of come up with a really cool, in the narrative, a really cool combo. The thing that they did not include, and it was right there in 4th edition, is skill challenges. I don't know how many YouTube channels I've seen where people are bringing skill challenges into 5th edition, and it was right there for them to bring into Daggerheart and use. The closest they came is they talk about some stuff over in their section about countdowns, which is a mechanic they took from Blades in the Dark and Forged in the Dark games, where you have these countdown clocks and everybody is working to chip away at it. They kind of did that with the chase rules, and you basically if you want to do skill challenge, you just kind of dress up the countdown clock rules and make it where different people are describing how they're using different abilities to chip away at the countdown. And, again, you can do like the chase rules where you have 2 dice. And so it basically becomes, 3 successes before 2 failures, or 5 successes before 3 failures, or whatever you want to do. You can basically bring skill challenges into Daggerheart using the countdown clock rules. So those are just 5-6 things that you need to be looking for in your first session of Daggerheart. If you've stayed this long with us, thanks for checking it out. Our next video is going to be how to level up your GM game in Daggerheart using techniques we learned from games like Freebooters on the Frontier. Thanks for joining us.